WJCT-PO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and it's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among the headlines we're going to discuss, Jacksonville lawmakers begin cutting the mayor's budget as the state's chief financial officer pays a visit from DOGE. A judge orders a halt to construction at Alligator Alcatraz as progress moves forward at Camp Landing. St. Johns County residents grapple with the loss of a beloved hotel, and yet another teen is injured on an electronic device. It's back to school as Duval quietly removes more books from the library shelves, and the school board rolls back student lunch programs. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by David Bauerlein, Metro reporter at the Florida Times-Union. Good morning, David.
Good morning, everybody.
Randy DeFore, attorney and former Jacksonville City Council member. Good morning, Randy.
Good morning, Ann.
Jim Piggott, longtime City Hall reporter at News for Jax.
Retired.
Now retired. And, reluctantly so, based on the conversation we've been having this morning. And Jake Stofan from Action News Jax, reporter there. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning.
So I want to start, wow, what a week at City Hall. We've been talking about it even before the show, a lot to go through. It's budget season. There's a surprise audit from the state, a vote to roll back property taxes. David, how are you making sense of it all?
Yeah, it's been a pretty lively start to budget season over there for sure. And, there's obviously where we stand right now is the Finance Committee of the City Council is doing its annual budget workshops. And they started off by saying, we're going to cut property taxes slightly. It's like maybe about 1% of the tax rate. But that could be a start. And obviously now they have to cut programs from the mayor's proposed $2 billion budget in order to offset the tax rate cut. So a lot of it is what's going to be cut, and then they'll finish their report or their findings later this month, and then ultimately it's up to the full 19-member council. So the Finance Committee may be more hardcore in terms of some of its assessments, but I don't know that the full 19-member council will go where they try to lead the city, and so we're going to have some pretty fierce debates, I think, between the mayor's office and city council members who want to cut the budget.
Just as recently as last week or even early this week, people were sort of talking tentatively about an, eighth of a mil, now a full mil. That seems
No, I'm sorry. And I'm just to be clear, it's an eighth of a mil,
okay,
which equates to about a 1% cut in the property tax rate. It's not a huge, not even a really truly notable difference that people will see in their tax bills. But it is a cut, and it means that you have to find savings for it elsewhere in the budget.
And what's driving that conversation? What is motivating city council members to say that in what is already kind of a lean budget year that they want to be rolling back the property rate?
I think they would argue it's not a lean budget year, that there's a lot of money coming into the city. The tax base is growing, so that generates a lot of property taxes. They have a one-time $40 million payment from JEA, this extra payment on top of what they usually get. The city council, and with the mayor's support, increased the residential garbage fee, though that brings in a lot more money. And their argument is, the revenue is growing faster than inflation, faster than population growth. And, that's been going on for a few years, and now we should control the property tax rate.
Jake, all of this is happening. These budget hearings got underway yesterday, the same day that state auditors arrived, along with the chief financial officer, to begin going through the city's records, essentially, and audit what they are saying is, contributing to unreasonable budget increases and unreasonable taxes.
Well, and the new CFO, Blaise Ngolia, applauded the City Council Finance Committee for making that decision to roll back the millage rate by an eighth of a mil. And the mayor made a comment that she felt like a lot of what happened in the Finance Committee yesterday was performative, perhaps because the CFO was there. A lot of what's informing or driving a lot of these conversations around the state audits, as well as, rolling back the property tax rate, is that there's an expectation that voters will have the opportunity to, fully eliminate property taxes next November. So one could make the argument that, city governments are going to have to figure out how to operate without this enormous revenue source. So, Angolia made the argument, I want to see city council do more to roll back property taxes because they very well may be faced with, kind of a catastrophic situation, just a year from now, if that measure ultimately passes, if it makes it on the ballot at all. I mean, obviously the legislature is going to have to do that, and there's sort of different schools of thought on how exactly they might approach it. Are we maybe just going to eliminate property taxes for people over the age of 65 who own their homes outright already? Or are we going to go with what the governor is asking, which is a full elimination of property taxes? So, they're talking about a lean budget. 2027 budget could be, you're missing out on like 50%.
Skeletal, right.
So, the 13 million, one could argue, is like, that's a drop in the bucket. They're going to have potentially a much bigger problem on the horizon. So it might be prudent to figure out how you're going to operate the city. What is the most important things that you're going to be funding right now? But obviously the cuts yesterday, we saw one of the mayor's kind of priorities, a telehealth pilot program. There was a new dental access program that was cut. They pulled out of the North Florida Regional Council. All right. I got it right this time.
You got it.
The name keeps changing.
Yeah, that was about $390,000 if I remember correctly. And today they're going to be getting into some of the direct contracts. So obviously a lot more cuts. I think yesterday they managed to get rid of about $7 million out of what they were calling a $27 million budget hole. So they still have $20 million more to go. What they cut, we'll find out today and throughout the coming weeks.
Yeah, and you guys are going to be attending budget hearings again today. You're playing a little hooky this morning, so thank you for being here while that gets underway. You did mention the mayor's comment yesterday about the CFO's appearance here in Jacksonville and how she thought that some city council members might be responding to that proactively. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
I am sincerely hopeful that once we get to the full council that we'll have less performers and more statesmen. This is clearly something that is just so fiscally irresponsible for us right now. And it frankly just doesn't give any tax relief to speak of. It gives people a little more than $1 a month into their pockets, and it takes millions of dollars away from what we can spend on public safety, what we can spend on roads and sidewalks and potholes. And these are the things that people are telling us they want.
Randy DeFore, how much do you think the presence of the chief financial officer in town might have played into the council's decision to, on this first day of hearings yesterday, approve this rollback?
Well, it may have played somewhat into it, but they have been talking about reducing the taxes for a while, if you've listened to some of these councilmen or women. And, this whole thing about removing the property tax, I find that very hard to believe that's going to happen. You got to pay for these services somehow. So
you mean the state's proposal to get rid of property taxes across the board?
Correct.
Yeah.
People are more concerned about why are there potholes in their roads? Why are their garbage isn't being picked up? Why, do they feel safe? This comes at a cost. So, how are you going to pay for it? Sales tax? That's not going to do it for Jacksonville. We're not a tourist town. So at the end of the day, I don't foresee personally property taxes going away.
Yeah.
I think what I understood the CFO was talking about was something where eliminating property taxes for people who have homestead exemptions. So you own your home, you occupied, you have a homestead exemption. Well, there's a lot of property owners there that doesn't cover if you own apartment complexes or shopping centers or warehouses, all that stuff. So a lot of times the business lobby doesn't like that kind of thing because they know what's going to happen. If you give everybody who's got a homestead exemption a free ride, then the government's turn around and say, well, we got to raise the tax rate on everybody else just to stay even. So it's kind of like a waterbed. You push down on one side, it goes up on the other.
Jim, I want to ask you because the mayor made clear that she wanted to meet with the CFO. There had been a dispute about whether the auditors were going to be required to sign a form, basically kind of a standard non-disclosure and, to access the information on the city servers. And in the end, they didn't sign that. The CFO said they weren't going to sign that, but she wanted to meet and discuss that with him and try to come up with a resolution. And in the end, he didn't meet with her. He the quote that he gave to our reporters here that were asking him about it yesterday said, quote, "I've just been inundated protecting taxpayers of Florida and have not had the chance to have a conversation with her." But he held a press conference on the steps of City Hall yesterday afternoon.
Well, you look at this, and I say this all the time, it's so political. Watching what's happening, the fight between a Democratic mayor and basically a Republican city council, the auditor coming in, a Republican, that's what's happening. And it's just like, it's kind of stupid in a way because we're dealing with our money, the citizens here in Jacksonville. I know, I'm talking to you guys beforehand. When I was covering this, I loved budget time. It's where you really get to the dirt of things. And as I mentioned to Jake and to David and Nancy, I'm sorry, Randy even knows this too. This is the time of year when it sets the stage for the city. And I know it sounds boring talking about a $2 billion budget and, oh, we're going to spend money here, we're going to take money away here. But this is what it all comes down to. This is what it comes down to the citizens here in Jacksonville. This is your wallet. This is your money. You're talking property taxes. You're talking audits of spending and whatever, and what programs we're going to be in. I think what's going to happen, I think the general public, if you put this to a vote, heck yes, cut my property taxes. I don't want to pay this. I mean, I pay property taxes, and I'm going, oh, that'd be nice to have this. But I also realize, things maybe I don't realize is I'm going to lose some services. The neighbor across the street that may need some help, some health help, is not going to have that anymore. That's why I always tell people, they go, well, why do we care about city government? It's because this is where it all begins. This is where it all happens. Everything that affects you is happening right now at City Hall. And they're making a political game out of this, bringing in this auditor to make these.
Yeah.
Randy, you know all this all too well.
I just, if it's okay, I think it's so interesting that they're bringing in this auditor because who owns the purse? They do. The council does. It's their budget. It's not the mayor's budget. And I hope they do find stuff. I hope a lot of the things that I felt very uncomfortable with was where we had city council members who sat on nonprofits and they were receiving significant, those nonprofits were receiving direct contracts, significant in amounts of money. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions. And that's not okay. So let's find out what they find. If they don't find that should tell you everything we need to know.
So in terms of what they're actually going to be looking at, David, I mean, we don't know necessarily, although we do know some things that they're not going to be looking at, because one of the questions that Blazing Goliath was asked yesterday, the CFO, you're going to look at the Jaguars deal, this stadium of the future, the biggest deal of the city history. And he basically said, no, you guys have reported on that. It's been vetted. And I don't have any interest in going down that road.
Yeah, they're not going to look at the police. They're not going to look at the fire department. They're not going to look at the big economic development deals like the stadium deal. Where I think a lot of it's going to focus on is the diversity, equity, inclusion programs. The state law says that's the point of one of the things the Florida DOGE is supposed to look at. That's one of those things where what really is a DEI program is having a Martin Luther King breakfast. A DEI program is having advisory boards for Blacks, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans. Is that a DEI program? It looks like they're going to look at some of those. So I think really, I'll bet their recommendation is going to be to eliminate some, quote, DEI programs, however that might be defined by the state. I did think it was interesting that the Florida DOGE asked for minutes and a lot of details about the mayor's African American Advisory Board and the mayor's Hispanic. No, it's one of. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought. There were two boards they asked for, two they didn't. It's just kind of interesting how they're kind of cherry picking which ones.
Well,
they look
what
at.
about, for instance, the Disabled Services Division? Has that been getting similar attention from anti-DEI voices as some that are more based around race or ethnicity?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that's an effort to be an inclusive part of the community. It's not. That's not part of it. So I don't know it's just what exactly do they mean by DEI? What is that exactly
And
going to
David,
focus on?
and I know you can't answer this because it would be an opinion on that. But are those programs and those boards? They're just boards. They don't cost anything. Uh, they just make recommendations, and that's where the vote comes in. So I always wonder what's wrong with having those boards if it doesn't cost a penny. You're not paying those board members. I mean, has that ever been discussed?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not a huge amount of money, and I recall now was the Florida DOGE is looking at the mayor's African American Advisory Board and the mayor's LGBTQ Advisory Board,
And I was
but
just
not
named to
looking.
that board.
Didn't want to ask.
You
for
were
the,
just named to that board?
Yes, and they have not met yet. I'm not getting any money
Right.
to be on that board, and there's been no meeting of that board at this time. So how could they be looking at it?
Jake, I want to ask you because one of the things that the CFO mentioned yesterday while he was on the steps of City Hall, and he didn't directly name Jacksonville, but he said he'd heard rumors that some city governments are scrubbing their records to remove, indicators of DEI programs, and that, I mean, he really proposed some serious sanctions if that was the case. He talked about issuing subpoenas. But he didn't say kind of where that information was coming from or whether it was verified.
Yeah, I would be surprised if he was talking about Jacksonville specifically there, just because the city, obviously fulfilled those records requests, early on. There's obviously another county in Florida that has maybe taken a little longer to do so. So, I don't want to name them and be wrong, but I have an idea of probably who he's talking about. I don't think it's Jacksonville. The mayor didn't think so either. But, on your point of sort of changing terminology or scrubbing, financial data to maybe hide references to things like DEI, I was able to ask him about, the city's chief of analytics, which, as we know, formerly was the chief of diversity and inclusion, and asked him, is that something that could potentially, be highlighted in this report? Because you have this entity that was once by name about diversity and inclusion, would perhaps fall under the sort of crosshairs of Florida DOGE. And he said, absolutely, it's not about the name of a position. It's about what are they doing in effect.
That's
So-
interesting. I mean, we had the chief of analytics on, Dr. Parvez Ahmed, yesterday talking about new statistics that the city's keeping to try to track, disparities. And yeah, you're right. His title did change after he got pushback from the city council.
So that's perhaps one thing that I wouldn't be too surprised if we see that pop up in the report, because they may look back and say, hey, this used to be called this. Now it's called this. It's the same person, perhaps serving a different function, but a similar function. So,
Yeah.
We can save $200,000 or whatever a year. I'm trying to remember the salary off the top of my head, but
Right. If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Jim Piggott, Jake Stofan, David Bauerlein, and Randy DeFore about all the week's headlines. And in a bit, we're going to get to a controversial motel demolition and continued accidents with e-bikes and scooters in St. Johns County. But first, I want to shift gears and talk about some back-to-school issues. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can reach out on air at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or at FCC On Air. I just want to read a couple of comments before we get into the back-to-school stuff. We got an email from Doug saying, yes, Miss Mayor, please continue to increase my taxes and continue to fix the potholes in Ocean Way. Also, Mark emailing, I got my taxes for 2024. I'm sorry, it's a longer email than I can probably read. But he's saying my garbage tax is more than doubled and they no longer provide containers. I was just told to put bags on the street, locally looking to get some services in the Lake Forest neighborhood. So I do want to shift to the back to school issues because Monday is a big day for schools. Clay, Nassau, Duval, St. John's, Union, Putnam, Flagler, Columbia, and Baker all starting Monday, which is unusual. They're usually a little bit staggered. So they don't usually align this well. Jake, you had a great exclusive story this week about Duval County Public Schools and book removals. Can you just tell us what you found?
Well, I think most of these listeners have probably heard about the sort of prolific book removals over in Clay County. There's a fellow named Bruce Friedman who, pretty much challenges everything from the Berenstain Bears to name the controversial title. So Clay, has this process, a book challenge is filed, there's public record of the book being challenged. It goes through a process, and then generally those removals are reported on the state's annual report. Lots of districts report the books that are challenged and the decisions on those books in that annual report. But for the last 2 years, Duval County has reported 0 removals, and only 3 challenges 2 years ago and 0 challenges last year, if I'm remembering correctly. There's really only been 1 challenge that's kind of been litigated in Duval County. But that doesn't mean that the county has not been going through and culling its title selection kind of behind closed doors and quietly. So what I was able to figure out in conjunction with the Florida Freedom to Read Project, they've been kind of tracking certain titles that have been removed in other school districts and seeing how many copies are on the shelves in Duval County and other counties as well. And what they found was in June, at least 24 books, which included the Handmaid's Tale, Water for Elephants, Slaughterhouse 5, among others. There were several copies in August, and then come June, there were no copies. So
in June there were copies, and then in August there were none.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, however the months stack
Go in
up.
order, right?
Do they go around to the libraries? What do they do?
Well, so presumably what they're doing is they're looking at what other counties are taking off the shelves, on these annual state reports, and they're saying, okay, well, it was flagged on the state report, so we're going to go in sort of independently and, review these ourselves and take them off. Now, whether there's been a determination on these books is unclear. I asked the county to specify what step in the process these books are, but once they're placed under review, they're taken off the shelves. So, the interesting thing here is the whole argument behind, opening up access to these book challenges and requiring districts to come up with a process to review these for, the community to have an opportunity to give their input is, we're kind of seeing certain counties like Clay where there's many, 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 many book challenges that are publicly litigated. Well, those determinations are having a spillover effect in counties like Duval, and then the school district is going in and making these determinations kind of behind closed doors. So there is
sort of prophylactically. They're not getting complaints about these books. They're just
Exactly.
choosing to take them off the shelves.
And no one has an opportunity to weigh in on whether they think the book should remain on library shelves or not, because it's happening internally as opposed to, being kickstarted by an external complaint.
And I know it took a long time for you to get the information from the school district, so I hesitate to ask, but what is their response to your reporting? Have they given you a comment as to why they're doing this?
Their comment, they said that it was misinformation, which I'm not sure what that was in reference to. But, they basically explained there's different ways that books can be removed. They can be removed because another district has removed them and that triggers a review, or they can be, just as the media specialist is going through the library, if they see something that they think might be in violation of state law, they can sort of trigger a review on their own, or it can be a formal challenge. But as we know, there was only one formal challenge. If these books had been formally challenged, they would be before the review board, and they're obviously not. So we know that's not the case.
Right. And Jim, it is interesting, as he says, that, some of these districts, including Duval, might be taking their marching orders, or at least their, tendency to remove a book from a place like Clay that has had so many challenges by a single person. He's kind of responsible, I think, for the most book challenges in the United States, just
And
as an
I
individual.
wish there were more. But, Jake, my question being, who is making that decision in Duval? Is there one person that goes, that book, Handmaid's Tale, which many of us are familiar with, and Slaughterhouse 5, one of my favorite books I remember in high school, because Kurt Vonnegut's a Hoosier and I'm a Hoosier. But anyway, who's making that decision? Do we know?
That is a great question. We don't know.
Yeah.
We should know. And Randy, I know as a former politician, does that disturb you?
Well, it does from the sense that everything is supposed to be transparent, right? So, um, I mean that they should provide that information. I mean that's it's a public record.
Well,
You should know.
we know it's not the school board because the school board is not voting on these book removals. So it's someone within the school district.
I mean, in my recollection, there is a committee that reviews these, and that is like kind of, and because previously when we've covered this issue, they were talking about the timeline. Had they met, and so there is I think it's made up of media specialists and some people from the community, but there is kind of an advisory committee that goes through, reads some of these challenge titles.
Well,
You would think there would be then some announcement made, like this is our decision, or a meeting that would be open to the public announcing, hey, this advisory committee is meeting. Because we get that all the time with other city agencies.
well, it seems that from what I've witnessed, it seems like that committee deals with challenges from the community. It seems like there's another process at play when it comes to either a media specialist just sort of going through the library and identifying something that they find concerning, or just referencing that state report and seeing what other counties are doing.
Yeah, I think it
doesn't-
really gets to the heart of local control, right? I mean, I thought that was some really interesting reporting you had, Jake. The idea that one county can remove or a book because another county has gone through the process of deciding it doesn't want it for its students to read without without Duval County parents and families and students being able to know that's happening. I just think it's kind of very odd and a little bit bizarre because we hear about local control over and over again, but that's not exactly what's happening here.
Well, and it's not an accident. It's by design. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of the state report. I mean, it's great for us in the media to be able to see what's being removed, but really that report is sort of the roadmap, if you will, for other districts. So, this book is litigated in Clay. Clay says it should be removed. Hey, Duval, take notice because, if you don't, I mean, we saw what happened in Hillsborough. They had a book on the shelves, and the commissioner of education blasted them on Twitter and said, get it off.
We've got a call from Charles on the west side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. I would like to ask you for your best guess what the animus is about a World War II firebombing to be removed from Slaughterhouse 5. Like you, I read that in high school, and I read the rest of Vonnegut's novels, but I just don't understand. Can I get your best guess?
I mean, my best guess would just be kind of profanity, and it is rife with it. And so, I think if you're a parent, you don't want your child reading, profanity, you could say, well, I don't want them to read that book. I mean, we also have a question from Ed on Facebook, which I think is worth getting into a little bit. He says, why is it that we never see in the media the particular section of an actual banned book? Or I guess he means the objectionable section of a banned book.
The language.
And certainly that's something that you'll hear read aloud sometimes at school board meetings where parents are outraged over the content of a book. Sometimes they'll read some very, descriptive sexual passages or, kind of obscene, even some books where there have been descriptions of sexual assault, and they'll kind of read that. Parents, obviously making the case that this is not necessarily, if it's not appropriate for a public forum, perhaps it wouldn't be appropriate for a student. And I think that that's the argument that they are generally making.
That could be the case, but I mean, Slaughterhouse 5, I mean, I read it too, and I just remember being really just vivid, harrowing descriptions of what it was like to be in Dresden while that city was firebombed in Germany. And it's an anti-war novel, so that's for sure. I don't know. I just don't remember anything that stands out from that book that would be so objectionable that it would be pulled from shelves. And, if you go to Shamlin's Book Mine, the big used bookstore, they've got shelves for young adult readers, and you often find Vonnegut on those shelves. And so it gets back to the idea. It sounds to me, it just seems a little bit bizarre to me that if a parent were to object or a family objects to Slaughterhouse 5, it triggers this process where things are done more in the open. But if another county bans Slaughterhouse 5, then Duval County or any other school district kind of just sort of on background makes that decision. It sort of cuts families out of that decision-making process, I think, here in Duval County, if that's the case.
I mean, it does always kind of raise the question too of, the books being removed from the shelves. Parents certainly can make decisions about what their kids are reading, whether they're on a shelf or not on a shelf. And the schools do have that requirement now. There's a certain, deference that, a lot of times kids have to sign up for permission to use the library. It's not clear to me how many kids are clamoring to get into the library these days, given all of the other distractions that are, absorbing their time.
Well, think back when you were a kid and you were reading, like David, you'd mentioned you read Slaughterhouse-Five, and you read something dirty, and how you would run around to other kids. Oh, you got to read this. You got to read this, and then so what? I mean, that's part of growing up, and that's to me that's what happens. But reading Slaughterhouse-Five, reading Handmaid's Tale at that age, it made me read more. It made me want to go back to other books and read. I remember doing that. I remember going, "Oh, this is risque in a way, or this is bad," but it made me read, and I think that's the important thing.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking about all the week's headlines with our panel of media analysts. And if you'd like to join our conversation, you are welcome to give us a call on air at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. A few topics we've got to get to this week, including, a halt on construction, a temporary halt at what's called Alligator Alcatraz in South Florida. Construction perhaps beginning, or at least contracts being let on a project in Camp Landing here in North Florida. But Jake, I want to start with Fort Stewart. That's an incident that you covered, a tragic shooting that happened with a shooter from Jacksonville, as we know. What's the latest on that?
I just covered it the first day. I was pretty busy with the budget yesterday, but I can tell you from when I was sent up there on Wednesday. I'm getting my days correct. It's been a long week.
Yeah,
There's been a lot of
going
news this week. This was an individual. He was a sergeant at Fort Stewart and was able to bring a personal handgun onto the base and obviously shoot 5 fellow soldiers. And thankfully, some other soldiers that were around were kind of able to contain the situation before it got worse, and he was able to be taken into custody alive. Like you mentioned, he's from Jacksonville. He seems to have a lot of connections here. I know we went by his current or listed residential address, but most of the neighbors weren't really even kind of aware of him or didn't know much about him. But in some interviews that we've done with people who grew up with him, they seem pretty surprised by this behavior. Didn't see any indicators. We know that he had been arrested for a DUI recently in Liberty County, Georgia. So it's unclear whether this had anything to do with the lead up to him taking this horrific action. Obviously, the Brigadier General who oversees Fort Stewart made mention that that arrest was not known by his chain of command.
The DUI, yeah.
Yeah. So I think they're still trying to determine what motivated this. But it seems like those who were close to him were pretty surprised. It doesn't appear to be a case where somebody was perhaps radicalized like we've seen in some of these other base shootings in the past.
I think from interviews that we heard, and First Coast News had the uncle on the air, that he had called minutes before the shooting, called family members, and he didn't expect to survive this because he was basically saying goodbye, or this is going to be it for me. And family members were trying to reach back out to him, at least according to this interview. And, as questions we were talking a little bit beforehand, he's from Jacksonville. I would like to know more of where did he attend school? Were there problems here before? I mean, it's just a shocker, again, of what happened there so close, and then it relates right back here to Jacksonville again.
Right. Insofar as the detention facilities that are being built, or currently one the construction is being halted at Alligator Alcatraz, it's a judge who is demanding answers about who's actually detaining the inmates, which is an interesting question. And I kind of want to put it to you, Randy DeFore. I mean, you know, I will say the claim that the attorneys representing some of these detainees are making, I mean, even a year ago would have sounded sort of preposterous, basically saying they're being held without any charges. They've been barred from meeting with their lawyers, and they've had their pending bond hearings canceled. So, I mean, all of those things basically unconstitutional for anybody in the criminal justice system of the United States. But those are the allegations that their representatives are making right now for these detainees. And we know that the federal government, believes that there should be a different set of procedures.
Right. I think so. The ultimate question is who has the legal authority to detain these people, and I don't know that we've heard the answer to that yet. You know, because the federal government in Florida asked that the agreements be between the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and 3 Florida agencies: the Florida Highway Patrol, the Florida National Guard, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So that does seem to me to be that the Florida has the legal authority. And there are statutory requirements in the state of Florida for these for being detained. So there's these questions have to be answered.
Yeah. One of the reasons that the construction has been halted, I mean, it's already largely built out, but further construction because of environmental concerns and whether, that facility went through proper review. But David Bauerlein, it does look like there at least are some contracts being let on the Camp Landing site near Stark. That's a Florida National Guard site, but the plan that the governor has expressed would be to create another immigrant detention facility there.
Yeah, and that's been announced and talked about, and it's kind of been, they've had different timelines for it, so it's not really clear when that would start. But it does sound like things are moving forward on that. And so that would then have, I guess, a few hundred people detained in that in the same way that there is in South Florida. We don't know much about it. We don't know exactly who's going to be housed there. I think they have an airstrip there, so I guess they would be able to fly in and out of there. But yeah, there's a lot of questions, I think, still about that. I think for me, if I were living there, I think the big question is, on the one hand, you hear people talking about how the worst of the worst are being picked up and being housed in these detention facilities. Maybe people don't want that in their backyard. On the other hand, you hear stuff like, well, these people are just being picked up on really minor things and they're not a danger. So I think there's a lot of questions about exactly who's there, what the security would be like. And then there's the bigger questions of, who's actually running this? I don't think I think basically the federal government sort of gives local states the power to sort of carry out federal immigration law, which I think is what's happening here, because the state tried to have its own law, and that's been put on hold by a federal judge. But it's all very murky in terms of where those lines of authority are, and whether people are getting due process, which is the hallmark of the American justice system.
Yeah. I want to move to St. Johns County news a little bit, particularly because there was just another really tragic incident that happened there this week with a 8-year-old boy this time in Nocatee, injured by a UPS truck, apparently, riding a motorized scooter. They've had a number of incidents, Jake, there with whether it's electric bikes or scooters and young kids. In this case, the child wasn't wearing a helmet. Other cases they have been, but obviously, significant injuries in a lot of these cases. And your station reported earlier this week that the county was, had approved some resolution in terms of reinforcing the ideas behind bike safety, but they really backed away from mandating any requirements. They had initially proposed e-bikes would be required to have turn signals. They'd be required to have lights. They would be limited on pedestrian paths to under 10 miles an hour. And basically what they have recommended instead is just a suggestion that those would be good, that they should have lights and they should observe these speed restrictions.
I've got to tell you, I mean, my biggest question in all this is why is this seemingly such a big problem in St. John's? I mean, I haven't seen a ton of stories about the e-bikes in Duval or Clay or, it's kind of an enigma to me. I guess they're just popular over there, but I mean, generally St. Johns County is going to be a more conservative place, so mandates are usually a bad word when it comes to conservative circles. So I think perhaps they're kind of deferring to education and maybe a little responsibility on behalf of parents. You're going to buy your kid this e-bike. You need to make sure that they're being safe on it.
Yeah.
I know there's some state regulations already on e-bikes, but there's kind of a little bit of gray area. I think there's certain e-bikes that kind of fall out of the category based on, the top speeds that they're able to reach. It's
an interesting question about why, Jim. I mean, I know that, prior to the boom of electric bikes and scooters, there were a lot of problems in that same area of St. Johns County with golf carts,
And think about here, the mini
young
bikes.
people
Do
in
you
golf
remember the mini?
Yeah.
The mini, but it was like 2 years ago or a year ago that they had the accidents. People, the kids riding those. We called them mini bikes when we were little. I think now they call them mini, but they were everywhere, and there were accidents, and there were a bunch of kids hurt. This was a few years ago, and they wanted to make regulations banning that. But I see now. I mean, retired. I'm out all the time. I see those bikes everywhere here in Duval County, and kids out on the road, not on the sidewalk. I go, wait a minute, are these allowed on the sidewalks, or they have to be on the road? There's confusion, I think, about that, and I really do. I know the sheriff's office has mentioned at times we've got to come up, or the safety handing out. They did that in St. Johns County, giving out safety regulations. But really, something should be done, because I see those things everywhere, darting out, cutting out, and I see kids on them, and that does concern me.
Yeah, and I mean, with the delivery truck element, the last time it was an Amazon truck, but there are a lot of these trucks out in the same time of day where a lot of kids are at home. Perhaps their parents aren't home yet, and there seems to be a collision course there for sure. I want to talk just briefly about this motel, this historic motel. It's not officially recognized as a historic site, but the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation just recently put the Magic Beach Motel in Volano on its 11 to save list, saying that it had this cultural significance, it had this historic kind of Art Deco design. It's going to be removed, and it's something that residents there are not too happy about, but that the county has decided it doesn't have any jurisdiction over. David, they basically said that there's a state law that if you're within the coastal hazard area and you don't conform, the county can't do anything.
It's a shame too, because especially in St. Johns County, where so much of their attraction is preserving history and being able to kind of almost drive through a historic corridors of see architecture changing over the years. It seems to me like there should be some sort of a change there. If it's important to preserve a building, then I'm not sure why it should be any difference in the coastal hazard area than it is anywhere else.
We've got an email from Ricardo saying that the law was meant to expedite hurricane recovery by limiting local rules that would hinder demolition and rebuilding of hurricane-damaged buildings. It wasn't supposed to allow developers to run roughshod over local communities and authorities. We're going to have to leave it there. Jim Piggott, Jake Stofan, David Bauerlein, Randy DeFore, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. It's great.
All right, up next, we talk to the CEO of Mosh about sifting through the remains while planning for the future.
Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One texter call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. The Florida Theater presents The Psychology of Cults, a live event exploring how cults form, why people join, and what it takes to leave. Wednesday, October 8th at 8 p.m. Information at floridatheater.com.
A creative approach to caregiving for an elderly parent. I'm Dr. Joe Servin. Join me tomorrow at 4 for What's Health Got to Do with It, only in WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville.
Redrawing congressional boundaries usually happens once every 10 years. But Governor Ron DeSantis has raised the possibility of a mid-decade redistricting. He says Florida got a raw deal from the last census and should have got more seats in Congress. On the next Florida Roundup, what do you want to know about the redistricting process? Email your questions and comments to radio@thefloridaroundup.org and listen Friday at noon.
All eyes are on Texas after Democrats flee the state to stop a Republican plan for redistricting. This week on the Friday News Roundup, the standoff over new GOP congressional maps and nationwide reaction. Plus, new tariffs, the White House plans a response to the Epstein controversy, and HHS Secretary RFK Jr. guts vaccine funding. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Hey, welcome back. So the Museum of Science and History is closing its doors ahead of decamping to its new location, but it is also preparing a final farewell celebration. Here to tell us about it is Mosh CEO, Dr. Alastair Dove. Welcome back.
Good morning, Ann. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to see you, Al. So this event is kind of I guess it's your grand hurrah, right? From the old location before you get to pull out and move. There's going to be a little hiatus. So what are you having people here to celebrate?
Yeah, so what we really wanted to do was to give the community a chance to celebrate their museum. It's been in this location for 60 years. And so that's a lot of memories, a lot of great experiences, a lot of moments of wonder, people who've come and experienced our programs. Maybe they've done a sleepover, slept under the whale if you've ever done one of those sleepover programs. Or maybe you've gone to a laser show in the planetarium and you want to celebrate and remember that. This is a chance for you to come out and see the old museum off before we turn our attention to building the new museum experience.
Yeah, but you have been kind of moving on, including this last exhibition that you put together, which included some real treasures of kind of the basement, I guess, if there is a basement at Mosh. There's the old, Star Wars lunchboxes. There's the actual real telephone booth, which, you can't find really anywhere anymore.
Yeah, that was a surprising thing. We bought the telephone booth out, and yes, museums have all kinds of things in the stacks. And so we had this old telephone booth, and seeing kids interact with the telephone booth has been really amazing because a lot of kids these days have no idea what to do with a telephone that has punch buttons or even a rotary dial. And telephone booths, when you realize you don't see them on the street anymore. So, just seeing how in relatively short order things become museum artifacts, and something as familiar as a phone booth is now consigned to the museum collection. So.
I mean, I thought it was hilarious when I was at the museum the last time, and you were sharing a story about, trying to demonstrate how the phone booth worked, explaining you had to put in a coin in order to hear a dial tone. Can you explain what happened there?
It was a bizarre interaction where and I learned about myself too in that experience. I was talking to a young person and explaining how a phone booth worked and that you had to put in a coin to get a dial tone, and the child's response was, "What's a dial tone?" And then it's like, "Oh yeah, you probably haven't heard one of those before." So yeah, these are the moments of when you really realize how rapid technological change has become and how quickly something can become a museum piece.
Yeah, and so have you been hearing good feedback from people about just kind of their memories of Mosh and these last days?
Yeah, there really is a lot of nostalgia for the museum, which is wonderful. And we've even had people say to me that the museum was a second home to them at some part of their childhood. So, those are really heartwarming experiences, and we want to celebrate all of that in our Legacy of Wonder celebration this weekend. This Saturday from 10 to 4 at the museum. But then we'd like to turn our attention to creating a new museum experience where a whole new set of generation of experiences can be created, where people can celebrate the future as much as we do the past.
And you're going to be giving sort of a look ahead at that as well?
I'll give a little sneak peek talk during the day. I think that's scheduled for 1:00 in the planetarium. But it is a free event thanks to our friends at ViStar. So anybody can come down. We'll have food trucks. We're going to have some bands playing. So there'll be music, food, and celebration. But really what we'd really like people to do is bring their memories, bring their best experiences of Mosh, come ready to share them. We'd love to hear those stories about how Mosh has been important to people's lives and to share those with each other, because museums, like other cultural institutions, are really community spaces where it's everybody's museum together. It's not ours.
Yeah. And so after the Saturday celebration, I mean, what's going to be happening in this little interlude before the grand opening of the new one?
Yeah, so we close the current museum iteration on the last day of business is August the 31st. So after September 1st, you can't come to the South Bank location anymore. But that's okay. We're not going away completely. We've just secured our outreach vehicle. So we're going to have a mobile mosh that will be bringing the collection and the programs into the community, into schools, so that people continue to benefit from the museum, its collection, and its expertise in the time that we're closed.
And how are we doing are we sticking with our fundraising schedule? Is everything apace?
Yeah, we're doing well on the fundraising. Obviously, there's still more to go. There's never enough, it seems, as you know from your own experiences. So it's going well. We have enough to begin building the new building, which we're excited about. We need more to finish all of the exhibits that will go in there and to make sure that every part of the museum is experiences as good as it can be. So.
Yeah. Well, if you want to say farewell to Mosh, the event is Saturday, August 9th. It's from 10 to 4. Legacy of Wonder, a community celebration, and it is free.
It is free.
So, Al, thank you so much for being here today.
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have comments or suggestions or feedback, you can send it to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight or find our entire archive at wjct.org or wherever you get your podcasts. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Corum. Our interns are Lo Oliveri and Camille Crawford, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us Monday when we discuss a new incident that happened in Central Florida where raw milk sickened more than a dozen people, including children. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
This is WJCT News.